Welcome to the Veterans Who Build show. Today's guest, we have an Israeli naval captain and warship commander, someone who had an incredible life story and is now running a real estate private equity firm with billions of assets under management. He also is involved with nonprofits supporting the veteran community, a proud father and husband. I'm really excited for y'all to learn lessons from his life, from his business, from his military experience. To our subscribers, thank you for subscribing. To our listeners, a reminder to please subscribe to our channels, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Ron Eliasaf.
Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Welcome to the Veterans Who Build show. I am very excited for y'all to hear Ron's story. Ron, thanks so much, man, for joining the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, I like to ask where our guests are calling from. For me, I've been familiar with where you're located. I can see it right away. Where are you calling from?
Midtown Manhattan. We're on 54 and Broadway.
That's awesome. Given that, this is a show about the built environment, no better place than Midtown Manhattan. Awesome. So I'm going to kick off with Ron's formal introduction. Ron is a retired captain of the Israeli Navy, where he served active combat duty as a commander of a naval warship. Ron currently sits on the board of AFN, a nonprofit apolitical organization providing vital assistance to Army veterans and civilians suffering from PTSD, and is also on the board of American Friend of Unistream, which supports entrepreneurship programs in the periphery of Israel. Ron is passionate about real estate, surfing, and most importantly, serving as a good role model to his 3 children. Professionally, Ron founded Northwind Group in 2008 and oversees all company investment activities across its equity and debt strategies. Throughout his career, Ron has executed over 225 real estate transactions in the U.S., totaling over $4 billion in value. In 2017, Ron spearheaded the creation of Northwind's debt platform, including the formation of Northwind's dedicated closed-ended real estate debt funds with now over $3 billion in AUM. Ron, that is a serious introduction, and that is why I'm very excited for everyone to hear your story, gain some insights from your story. As the audience knows, we like to kick off in really chronological order of your life. So let's start off with where you grew up and what in your childhood led to your service.
Sure. So I grew up in Israel as an army brat. My father was a general in the Israeli Air Force, a fighter pilot. So I moved around from Air Force base to Air Force base across the country in Israel, and also lived in Boston for a couple of years where my father went to school there. So I, until my 9th grade, I moved almost 10 houses, right? So I was moving around a lot. But the Army was an integral part of my life since I was born.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. What was that experience like shifting from the U.S., Boston, back to Israel during childhood?
I mean, I think it gave me good people skills and knowing how to make friends. And on the other hand, probably, creating long-term relationships, especially this was the day there was no Facebook, no, easy way to communicate. So, I think it's, for me now, for my kids, it's important that we stay in one place so they can build a whole ecosystem of friendships. So it was definitely challenging. I didn't think about it at the time. As a kid, I was just having fun, right? And as long as my family was there, that was home.
Yeah, wow, interesting. Around what age, time frame was that for you?
So we moved around since I was born until the 9th grade. On average, every 2 years, we kind of moved and hopped around. So
wow,
pretty hectic.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear, as we continue learning about your story, if you're able to pull from that in hindsight into like applicable, life circumstances, I'll call it. So I'll put a bookmark on that front. So, moving forward, you're bouncing around a lot. I'm guessing that come military age, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, you're back in Israel at that point.
Yeah, back in Israel, finished high school. It was obvious I was going to go to the army and I'm going to do something significant. The upbringing I had, serving in the army was the obvious route. In Israel, it's also mandatory, but I did more than the mandatory service. I served for 6.5 years in the Navy. Kind of betrayed my family tradition of the Air Force, but wanted to chart my own path and not be the son of in the Air Force. And the Navy was a great fit for me. I always liked surfing, as you mentioned, and being in the Israeli Navy was a great experience. I was commander of a ship for 2.5 years after I graduated the Naval Academy, which took about 2 years on its own, and then I went back to the Naval Academy as a team leader and instructor there for the ending part of my service.
Mm-hmm. So you highlighted it with the interest in surfing in general. I was gonna ask what your connection was with water, right, going into the Navy. So you addressed that. Now going from, I guess, the beginning of your service, walk us through to the extent that you can recall, walk us through kind of getting started and what your path was to becoming a warship commander. I mean, that's a pretty amazing place to be. Yeah,
That's honestly was a direct path. I did the Naval Academy course, which it's the officers course, which is a 2-year program. I knew I wanted to go to a specific unit in the south of Israel, which is geared towards the Gaza Strip at the time. I enlisted in 1998, and in 2000, when I got my first command, initially as an XO, executive officer, and then went to advanced command training and came back to the same unit as a commander of a ship. So this was back in the first Intifada, 2000, 2001. The entire environment changed rapidly. We had to deal with insurgents and terrorist attacks from the Gaza Strip back then to Israel. So it was a very intense service. And then after doing that for 2 years, went back to the Naval Academy to train and share the experience I've gained to younger officers.
So what were those time frame blocks, like generally speaking, right? So you enlist, training is, I think you said, around 2 years.
Yep. Then you become an officer. Then about 1 year serving as an XO, as an executive officer, basically second in command of a ship. Then going back to another 6 months of advanced training, coming back to the same unit as commander now, serving for about 2 years, and then end of the service, going back to the academy as an instructor, team leader.
Yeah, amazing. And was all of that time strictly on a ship, strictly in the water, or were there some land activities as well, just in terms of training?
I would say about 3 years was active service on the water with either as an XO or as a commander, and the rest was either training or being an instructor. But it was an intense time. I would never replace it. I think it gave me a lot of tools and knowledge, abilities. I say now to my team here, we're in real estate, we're not dealing with life or death situations, right? So there's no real reason to get stressed, right? And I think that calmness, that ability to face adversity, not get overexcited, focus on what's important and execute it, is a lot of the things that I got from my service, and I think a lot of veterans get from their service.
Yeah, totally. So I'll put a pin on that. We'll circle back on that point when we get to translatable skills, and that's a great thing to call out, right? So sticking with the service time frame before we move on here, do you have any unique stories that impacted you in your life during your service that you'd like to share?
There's so many. I think the mistakes I've done probably shaped me the most. One instance where it was a rough sea and I made a wrong decision, taking heading out the wrong course, not well prepared enough, and that really taught me the gravity of what a decision you make has on other people on your team. There's so many instances relating to more active combat that you realize a split split-second decision you make has a huge impact on the life and the well-being of other people. So I think the amount of responsibility you get at such a young age is just, you can't compare it to anything else that you do on the business world or elsewhere.
What just came to mind as you just shared that story is, when I was in industry working on job sites, that concept of sink or swim was kind of like always relevant, right? In terms of just learning, in terms of being able to execute projects, and it just, I'm laughing at myself here because for you, I guess that's more literal of a pun to be using. Yeah, really interesting. All right, so as you're finishing your service, you like to go and really dive deep as much as you can kind of express to the audience here and share your story on what the transition was like from your military career into civilian life.
I really had no idea what I wanted to do after the army, so I took a year off, like many people in Israel do, and I actually went surfing, and I ended up staying for almost a year in the Dominican Republic. Also had a surfing school there, worked as a bartender, and almost stayed there for life. But then realizing after a year as living as a beach bum, realizing that I need more challenge in my life. So I went back to law school, only university that really accepted me, right? Like just straight up the bat without, SATs and complex, because they had a special program for, combat officers. So in law school, started realizing that, I'm going to finish law school. I'm going to be almost 30 by the time that I'll finish it, and I have really no real business experience. So I started working as initially a driver/secretary for a local businessman that did a lot of real estate. Ended up, while I was in law school in second year, and then ended up becoming his kind of right-hand man. And he taught me, a lot about the business and about deal making. Very smart person. Unfortunately, he passed away very suddenly at the age of 55. And then some of his clients and friends asked me to help them with a few things, which I did related to their portfolios. One of them introduced me to his family office, and I ended up joining that family office and becoming their real estate guy. Even though I didn't know much about real estate at the time, this was 2007, so about 3 years after I left the Navy, and while I was in third year of law school. Ended up launching our first fund under the umbrella of that family office. I started Northwind in that year as my personal holding company for that fund. Northwind, it's because in Israel it's the best wind to windsurf and kitesurf. That's the name. We ended up raising some money, and then the financial crisis happened in 2008, and we were liquid. We had a fund, and we were able to start buying distressed debt in the U.S. I was flying back and forth. I was kind of the young guy doing most of the legwork. We teamed up with a local operator here in the U.S., and we started buying debt that was secured mostly by grocery anchored shopping centers. We ended up buying about 5 million square feet of those properties between 2008 to 2010. Should have bought more. I mean, every deal we were making in those years, we felt like we're the only idiots buying. In hindsight, they were very successful deals. I sold my stake in that portfolio in 2011. I had a passion to do real estate in New York, and I moved here in 2012 with my wife, and I had my young son at that time. He was 1 year old, and started doing development deals here in New York, ground up construction, complex adaptive reuse projects. Then shifted in 2014 to more income producing value add, and the velocity grew. We've done about 2 billion of real estate transactions. My confidence grew, but in 2017, it stopped making sense. The risks seemed too high on the equity, and the reward seemed, too little. So we shifted. This was probably the biggest decision I've done for the business. Shifted from the equity to debt in 2017 and started lending, and basically utilized the knowledge we've gained on the equity side to become a better lender. And then that really grew exponentially. So right now our debt book is almost 2.5 billion. We manage 4 closed-ended debt funds that we've launched in the last 5 years, and we've also evolved into becoming very active in the healthcare space, where we lend on income-producing portfolios of skilled nursing and senior housing across the country. So it was really an exponential growth in the last now 8 years since we've transitioned to debt.
I mean, you say this whole story very smoothly, and I find it to be really interesting because
it's a big story. Try to pack it in the short.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to highlight the fact that these are significant accomplishments, and I'm sure none of this is easy to accomplish. When you mentioned shifting from being that kind of a executive assistant, when you move from being a surf instructor into the general space of real estate, the person you're working for passed away, and then you shifted into this family office role, not knowing much about real estate. That's where I kind of had to laugh to myself in that concept of sink or swim, right? I mean, we just hear that so often in our industry. So I found that to be interesting. What was that, going back to that stage of your life? If you were able to give yourself, your younger self some advice in those transition periods, what do you think you would say to yourself to help in that process?
It's hard. In hindsight, I took a lot of big risks, right? So now, where I realize some of the risks I've taken, I would probably I tell myself, to take it down a notch. But I was so hungry, and I just, and I had this ambition and something in me that said, I want to do this and I want to do more. And I guess when you're young, it's easier to take risks. I mean, I remember telling to myself, what's the worst that can happen? I moved back with my parents, right? That's the worst thing that can happen. So again, when you become a family man, it's slightly harder to take these risks. When I was younger and just, on my own, it was easier. But I definitely took big risks that today I would tell my young self, don't do it. But you know what? Sometimes that's the only way to really make a leap, right? So you have to take it. And I'm happy that, I wasn't always successful, but I was always very truthful to myself, knowing, okay, what works, what doesn't. And the reason I've evolved from equity to debt is the realization that really being critical with myself on what worked and what didn't, and then identifying a new opportunity that makes sense, and then really being bullish on it. I think a lot of people sometimes get stuck in their ways and they do one thing, and I think it's good and it's important to be an expert, but sometimes the world moves. And if you don't recognize that shift early enough, you get caught out in the cold, right? And the shift, we were definitely an early mover to debt in 2017, where a lot of people were still deep in equity. And I think now where interest rates are, unfortunately, there's a lot of pain out there on the equity side.
Yeah, you know what I heard in terms of like a key concept that seemingly allowed you to get to where you are today was being, as you put it, being critical of yourself. And then in that critique scenario, in understanding what was right or wrong or good or bad or whatever, successful or not, being able to shift accordingly. And again, as you put it, right, the world moves and changes. So yeah, it's a great concept and not easy, right? It's not easy to be critical of yourself and recognize those things. So yeah, really interesting. And I mentioned in your introduction, they have 3 kids. In that story we got to you having 1 kid, and I just want to make sure I want to give a congratulations on having 3 kids, because that's an amazing thing.
Linking to back to the Army service, I think critical thinking, and after you finish a mission, debriefing and going on what went good, what went wrong, what needs to be improved. We're implementing it on our business on a day-to-day on non-mission stuff, right? But just that critical analysis of yourself and being truthful to yourself and to your peers, where you were good, where you need to improve, and constantly striving to improve. I think that's a super important tool that I've learned and we're utilizing day to day.
Absolutely. Yeah. After action report, I think would be kind of like the translation to U.S. military terms. Yeah, that's amazing. Before we continue, before I forget, have you returned to that surf area that you spent? I think you said a year at.
Oh, we go twice a year.
Oh, nice. That's amazing.
Once I go with my friends, with my buddies, and once with the family and kids, and everybody surfs there. It's amazing.
Amazing. Is the, I guess, was it a shop or the school? Is that still there?
The people are there. The shop turned around. It's been 20 years. It's but
Right.
I have friends there that I've known for 20 years, and it's amazing to we meet each other now only twice a year, but it's great.
That's awesome. That's great. Okay, so moving forward back to where you stopped, and I started asking questions. I think that was kind of like the initial phases of Northwind. So walk us through kind of how you got from that starting point to today.
So, initially we raised an $8 million fund, which seemed like a lot of money to me back then. And it actually allowed us to do quite a lot because we were able to leverage that fund with additional co-investors. So with that initial commitment, we teamed up with a local operator and we started buying the distressed debt on the grocery anchored shopping centers. We ended up doing almost $500 million of transactions. We had some institutional investors that came in and teamed up with us and wrote bigger and bigger checks. And then in 2011, I sold my stake in that business and used that cash with two GP investors to really fund the next stage, which was the move to New York and start doing development deals here. The initial deals were ground up construction, condo conversion, a hotel, and then moved to more standard income producing multifamily. And the larger transactions ended up being actually office transactions. I've done two large office transactions in downtown, one in 2015 and one in 2017, which was actually the last equity deal we've done in New York. We sold both of them in good timing, and one in 2018 and the other one in 2020, and made really big returns. I mean, the last deal we've done in New York, we've bought a 1 million square feet office building for $300 million, renovated, fully listed up to the SEC and to New York Health and Hospitals, and then sold it to a German bank for $850 million. So I think it was the largest office sale of that year.
Wow.
And I mean, thank God we sold at that time, because right now the office market is being decimated. And then, as I said, in 2017, kind of, even though we had a very large office position that we just bought, I said, no more, we're not buying anything else, and shifted to lending. Done about $200 million of loans between 2017 to 2019, and then launched fund number one, which was a $220 million fund. And now, we're in fund number 4. So overall, managing a significant amount now on the credit strategy. We are a lender on almost over 200 properties right now across the country. And, the team has grown. We have 25 people, 20 here in New York, 19 here in New York, 6 in Cleveland. So our healthcare team is in Cleveland. Our real estate team is here in New York. And the evolution of into healthcare was probably the last one. We started initially buying and then, lending on healthcare, which is a unique asset class. It's a niche asset class. Requires a lot of specific skills. But we really believe in the demographic trend long term in the U.S. And we think that the next 10 years are going to be very interesting for that asset class.
Would healthcare and life sciences be the same kind of demographic? They're different. What's the difference between those?
Life science, it's really campuses, office and lab for bio and other technology driven life science companies. Healthcare is a broad term. It could mean a lot of stuff. It could mean hospitals. It could mean medical office buildings. We don't invest in those. We're really focused on senior housing, skilled nursing, so the residential aspects of healthcare.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. When you're bringing up this, progression to where you're at today, what led you to selling your portfolio, if I'm remembering how you said that correctly, and then starting, I guess, your New York City journey?
So at that time, it wasn't a smart decision, I think. It was driven by my passion to do real estate in New York and the fact that in order to do that, you need capital. In hindsight, I think I left money on the table selling into 2011 because cap rates compressed after that, and I probably could have held on and make more. But but I had a need. I wanted to do something, and I realized that in order to do it, I need to do it on my own. So I had two other partners. They bought my stake. I made what I felt was a lot of money at the time, and it allowed me to start the next phase of my business. But it's in hindsight, it's probably the wrong decision. But again, it's hard to judge because everything leads you to where you are right now, and everything, I believe happens for a reason at the end of the day.
Correct.
So
It's
that
also
that gave me the initial liquidity, which I needed. I was still young to do the next phase, and I always put my money where my mouth is, and I put all my money into the business. I didn't own stocks or bonds or treasuries. It just all went to the business and as investments. And in New York, when you do a deal, equity deal, and you sign a contract, you put a deposit. It's a hard deposit. It's non-refundable, no contingencies. If you don't close, you lose the deposit. So it's a big risk. It's unlike other places in the country where you have due diligence and you can get the deposit back if you don't close. So it's a very aggressive market to do real estate. But luckily, we were successful. Until now, I only had one deal that lost money on the equity side. All the other deals made money. On the debt side, our track record is we have zero losses, and we actually have no defaults in the portfolio, and not a single loan missed a single interest payment, which is great.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to note that I'm asking you questions in hindsight, so of course it's easier to look back and critique what you did or didn't do, and having the knowledge you have today. So that's absolutely noted and understood. Where were you moving from? I don't know if I caught that.
So I 08, 09, 2010, 11, based in Israel, flying a lot back and forth to the US doing deals.
Wow.
And then my son was born 2011, so it was hard not being there enough. So we moved 2012 to the US.
Okay, yeah, wow, that's really tough. I was imagining you were just somewhere else in the US outside of New York, and yeah, wow. Okay, amazing. All right, so at this point, want to give you the opportunity to tell us about some career wins that you had that you like to share.
I think the biggest wins is selecting and bringing on the right team members. It's the most important aspect of our business and my company, and also be able to parting from those who are over time not performing at the level expected. It's always the hardest decision to make, and I'm a firm believer always giving everybody time to improve, but eventually it is intense work environment we're in, and it is a competitive environment. Nobody's waiting for us to. The deals are not waiting, right? If you don't do it, somebody else does them. So, but definitely the biggest win is having the right team members in the right positions and allowing them and giving them the environment to grow and improve. And nothing is done. It's not a one-man show. It takes a real team with different skills and different abilities to grow a business from 0 to 3 billion, and then I'm hoping our growth continues. So it's all about the team. That's the most important. That's the biggest win.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's not the first time we've heard that as being a career win on the show, and I love that dynamic, really your team, right? The people that are around you. I love that ends up being what you just said. Obviously, amazingly, incredibly important, right, to success. Because again, exactly as you put it, you're not a one-man show. So before we close out the professional side, I want to give another kind of opportunity to touch on any military to professional translatable skills. I know that we mentioned the ability to make decisions in this extreme environment, i.e. military, and recognizing that you're no longer in that extreme environment, so it allows you kind of more level-headed mindset if we're able to make that understanding of difference of environments. And then the second one was that ACR, right, after action report. Anything else come to mind that you'd like to point out?
I think the most important is the values you gain in the military service. So integrity, transparency, honesty, all of this translates from the military side to the business world. And I think that for our company, it's part of our core values. And then, it's leadership skills that you gain, and understanding how important it is to set an example and lead by example, and not by force or by authority. And I think that what makes successful teams when they have leaders that are in the weeds, work equally as hard or harder than anybody on the team, day in and day out, and feeling that there's solidarity and that is super important. When people feel they're being pushed down or managed down, it doesn't create a healthy environment.
Sure. Yep. Leadership is no doubt one of the pillars that can be translated military to profession. Absolutely.
And I'm still learning skills. It's never it's not the journey continues, right? It's always a learning and experience, and there's so many things I could be doing better, right? But just being honest to yourself mostly, about what you need to be doing better is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're highlighting there, and it's along the lines of what you've said a few times, which is that kind of like self-critique dynamic, which is the recognition that you could always learn, right? That you could always do something better, learn a new trade to do better, hire someone better. So I mean, absolutely agreed. Well said. We
ask, on the business side, we keep asking every day, same question. It's a simple question, but does it make sense? And if it stopped making sense, then we need to pivot. And equity stopped making sense, and we stopped doing it. And it seems so simple and trivial, but I see so many people not doing it. And the world, like I said, the world is moving so fast that it's the most important question anybody doing business, no matter what field, does it make sense? And if you recognize early enough when it stops, then and you're able to pivot, I think that sets you apart.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Of course, it's easier to just continue doing the same thing that you're used to doing, that you're comfortable with doing. And then, of course, on the alternative to that, it's harder to self-critique and pivot, right? And recognize if something doesn't make sense. So I love that call out. I laugh at it, just laughing at myself, right? Thinking of, what am I doing that doesn't make sense? It's a great, easy question that everyone could apply to a lot of things. So moving on, we like to close out the show with two final questions. One is wellness practice, and then two, any books you'd like to recommend.
So my real wellness practice and is my what gives me the most serenity and peace is surfing. Unfortunately, in New York, it's not as friendly, so I don't do it as much. So for me, it's finding time to work out, and keeping in shape. I've been doing it since the Army service, and it's part of my routine. I had periods that I was more in better shape and periods that less, but every time I find that it's always, if it's a run or if it's in a gym or whatever, even just, pumping push-ups in the office, whatever it is, it clears my mind. But surfing would be number one, right? Surfing is the ultimate zen place for me. And I had my best thoughts and ideas come to me after, an hour of surfing where I just don't think about anything, just the next wave. Or if it's kite surfing, which I also love doing.
Sounds like you need to open a secondary satellite office near a surfing area.
I wish.
That's great. All right. So any favorite books you'd like to recommend?
Lots of books, but one that came to my mind, I actually have it here at my desk to me. It's called The Price of Time. It's by Edward Chancellor, and it's the real story of interest rate and how the concept of interest and money evolved. But it really, it's a great history book. But the other part of it, which I find more interesting, is the biggest asset or the biggest resource that is realizing that is the most scarce is time. And I always tell the team, we always measure return on investment, but we should really measure return on time. And one of the biggest changes for me is realizing that it takes the same amount of work and time to do a $5 million deal than it is to do a $50 million deal. Same time. And it guided me that, if we want to grow, to take that risk and focus on bigger deals. And time is just slipping away. I started thinking lately about, okay, it sounds, kind of sad. How many summers do I have left, right, to surf, right? But like, I'm 44, right? So do I have 20 summers left? Maybe 30 until I lose my shape, right? So who knows? So it's time is definitely a concept that's on my mind, and I want to accomplish the most that I can. So that book that's why here it's always a reminder of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Out of curiosity, and I understand you're seemingly either just read it or reading it. Were you able to implement any, I don't know, time measurement into into your office?
Yeah, it's literally return on time.
Wow.
It's a measurement we talk about. It's not return on investment, return on time, and we rule out deals because of it. It's also measure. A deal that is super complicated is also sometimes we say, you know what, it's not worth our time. It's not worth the headache.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I know you're saying that. I wasn't sure if you yet were able to implement that, how recent or not it was. Yeah, really interesting. Wow.
It's in every investment committee we talk about it. Almost.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, Ron, really appreciate you taking the time, right, to join us to share your story. Thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thank you, Adam, for having me.
Yeah, to our subscribers, thank you very much for subscribing. To our listeners, a reminder to please subscribe to our channels, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. A shout out to our channel sponsor, Jet.Build. Thank you all very much for listening, and we will see you real soon. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.